Thursday, the 6th of August 2020. Welcome to Fear and Greed, the business podcast that sets you up for a successful day. I'm Sean Aylmer. Australia's second airline is ready for liftoff, but it will be a slimmed-down Virgin with fewer staff and fewer planes. That's our main story. Also coming up in today's podcast, Queensland and New South Wales get tough on border controls. The Prime Minister says Australia isn't a toady of the US, and how to look good in a face mask. Later in the podcast, I talk to local head of eBay, Tim MacKinnon, about the surge in online shopping. But first, here's a brief look at markets. Wall Street rose overnight, and the S&P 500, close to the end of trading, was just under 2% from its record closing levels reached back in February. Some better than expected earnings results and positive early data from an experimental COVID-19 vaccine underpinned last night's rise. But it's still pretty remarkable that shares are trading at these levels given the coronavirus. European markets were also higher. Now, the S&P ASX 200 closed 0.6% lower on concerns over the Melbourne lockdown. Now, among the top 10 stocks, iron ore miner Fortescue Metals was the best performer. It's now the fifth biggest company in the country, bigger than National Australia Bank, bigger than ANZ, Wesfarmers, Woolworths and Telstra. The highlight on the local market was the gold miners, with share prices rising on the back of a surge in the price of the precious metal. Gold hit a new record high of US $2,031 an ounce. Now, the immediate cause was the fallout from the blast in Beirut that killed more than 100 people, including an Australian. It fell back again after authorities said the blast wasn't a terror attack, before rising again overnight. Now, our resident gold expert Daniel Hines last week told us it would be heading beyond US $2,000. Turns out he was right. Oil prices rose a touch overnight on news that stockpiles in the US had fallen, while the Aussie dollar is buying almost 72 US cents. The long-awaited rebirth of Virgin Australia was outlined yesterday. The group will sack about 3,000 staff, or about one-third of its workforce, and discontinue the Tiger Air Australia discount brand. The airline will only fly Boeing 737s, that'll reduce maintenance costs, and it's reviewing options for Virgin Australia regional airlines. Its focus will be on domestic routes, not surprising given the coronavirus pandemic, but it will return to long-haul international flights when the market recovers. Virgin will reopen some lounges as demand increases, and importantly for all frequent flyers out there, travel credits and frequent flyer points will carry forward under the new owners. Now, the new owner is Bain Capital, and it still needs to get final creditor approval, probably in early September. Paul Scurrah will remain Chief Executive Officer of the group, and it hopes a much lower cost base can ensure the airline is profitable. Unions were broadly supportive of yesterday's announcement, having already received guarantees that worker entitlements will be paid out. Now, this is an airline that will be neither premium nor discount. Is Virgin competing on price or service or routes? I'm not real sure. That's a tricky strategy against a market leader like Qantas, who owns Jetstar. It's great that Australia will have a choice between two airlines, but until the coronavirus is mitigated, it will be very tough to judge just how well the new Virgin will perform. In the meantime, the company will still have to pay wages and maintenance costs. It's a bumpy introduction to the Australian skies for Bain Capital. It's up against a ferocious competitor. Let's hope they make it work. In a moment, the rest of the news you need to know this morning. If you're new to Fear and Greed, welcome. It's great to have you along. If you've been with us for a while, then you'll have heard this once or twice before. But for the benefit of new listeners, and we know you're out there, it's important to hit subscribe or follow, depending on which platform you're using. We're up early every day to make sure the latest business news is ready for you by 6:30 a.m. And hitting subscribe or follow is the only way to guarantee it lands in your playlist by that time. It's easy to do, and best of all, it's completely free. Overseas news first up. There are nearly 5,900 people dying every day from the coronavirus around the world, or one every 15 seconds, according to Reuters. The death toll has now surpassed 700,000, with the United States, Brazil, India and Mexico recording the most fatalities. Latin America, along with the US, is currently the epicenter of the virus. Now, South Africa is also causing global concerns. The World Health Organization is sending experts to the country to help deal with the virus. The country has had more than 500,000 confirmed cases, the fifth most, and nearly 9,000 deaths. President Donald Trump overnight gave an interview to Fox News where he said the virus was going away, notwithstanding the country recorded more than 57,000 new cases and almost 1,400 deaths on Tuesday. The president added that children were almost immune to the virus, which is factually incorrect, and he believes the vaccine will be available by the end of the year. The total number of coronavirus cases worldwide is now 18.6 million, with 702,000 deaths. One of the biggest scheduled movie releases of the year was Disney's Mulan. Normally, it would have had a major release across cinemas around the world, but given circumstances, Disney will release it online via its Disney Plus channel, with market watchers wondering whether it's a sign of things to come. Now, overnight, Disney said it lost nearly US $5 billion during the June quarter, with big losses across most of its business units. Disney Plus, though, was a diamond in the result. It now has 60.5 million subscribers globally, only 9 months after launching. Locally, there were 725 new cases of coronavirus recorded in Victoria yesterday, and 12 in New South Wales. There was some relief in South Australia after no new cases were reported, despite fears of a hotspot in northern Adelaide. A report in The Australian this morning says that Victoria faces rising number of cases until the end of next week, according to the Victorian government's own estimates, with peak impact during the last few weeks of this month. Now, the East Coast states are beginning to get very antsy about the numbers. Premier Gladys Berejiklian said New South Wales must exercise extreme caution. Anyone entering the state from Victoria will have to pay for a compulsory 14 days in hotel quarantine, effective from Friday night. And the only flights into New South Wales from Victoria will be via Sydney Airport. It's the same treatment anyone returning from overseas is getting. Queensland Premier Anastasia Palaszczuk has shut the border to all New South Wales and ACT residents from Saturday. It's only actually been open for a few weeks. Ms. Palaszczuk said the decision was taken following medical advice, but the Sunshine State's tourism industry isn't very happy, and the business community isn't very happy with the Victorian government. The hard lockdown in the state last night has pretty much hurt everyone, from supply and distribution to manufacturing, construction, IT, legal services, and the fuel and food delivery industries. The main issue seems to be the lack of concrete directives from the government. For example, McDonald's is unsure if it can keep its drive-through facilities open after the curfew time of 8 p.m. Jim's Mowing is unsure if its operators can continue mowing lawns and tidying gardens. It's a bit of a schmozzle in Victoria. Prime Minister Scott Morrison put a stake in the ground yesterday for Australia being independent of both the United States and China, saying while many watchers got hung up on communications between Beijing and Canberra, he was focused on the trading and economic relationship between the two countries. Mr. Morrison said he was always available to talk to Chinese President Xi Jinping and criticised Chinese bureaucrats and the state media for saying Australia was beholden to Washington. He said Australia's position on many issues were not tied to the US, adding that while President Donald Trump had threatened to ban Chinese app TikTok from the United States on security concerns, Mr. Morrison had no reason to do likewise. Now, China's influence in Australia was also under the spotlight in the High Court yesterday. Back in May, the federal police raided the home of New South Wales ALP member Shaukat Musselmain. Documents lodged in the High Court yesterday show that the raid was triggered by suspicion that a staffer of the MP, the staffer's name was John Zhang, was covertly working for the Chinese government to influence Australian politics and the policy decisions of the New South Wales Labor Party. The case continues. More signs are emerging of the two-speed economy in Australia. Victoria is pretty much stalled, or perhaps even in reverse, while the rest of the country is in about second gear. It's showing up in new car sales, which fell almost 30% in Victoria last month. Federal Chamber of Automotive Industries data shows that across the country, new vehicle sales were down almost 13%, compared to a year earlier. The falls were less dramatic in South Australia and New South Wales. Toyota remains atop the pile with 21% of the market, followed by Mazda with 11% and Mitsubishi with 6.5%. Toyota's new RAV4 model was the top-selling vehicle for the month. Victoria faces a ratings downgrade by S&P after it placed the state's AAA long-term credit rating on watch with negative implications. There's a 50% chance it will be downgraded, which makes running the economy more expensive. Major banks and insurers have held back almost $3 billion in compensation schemes from victims of poor financial advice and the fees for no service scandals, according to the Australian Securities and Investments Commission. Now, financial institutions are worried that some customers could be overpaid, ASIC says, and there's been limited interest in the accelerated remediation program. The deputy chair of ASIC said the regulator remained frustrated at the efforts of the banks and the insurers. The value of home loans surged by 6% during June as COVID-19 restrictions were unwound. The Bureau of Statistics said investors led the demand with new lending commitments at $17.4 billion during the month. Now, June seems a long time ago in the world of economics. So much has changed since then. Don't think new lending commitments will be up that much during July. The University of Melbourne is set to cut 450 jobs as it battles a $1 billion fall in revenue over the next 3 years as a result of the COVID-19 outbreak. A loss of overseas students is the main factor. Now, last month, staff at the university rejected a proposal to forgo a 2.2% wage increase, and now the uni's cut 450 jobs. The University of New South Wales has previously said it will cut almost 500 jobs, and Monash University will reduce its workforce by 277. And finally, how do you look good in a face mask? Well, make sure it's navy or perhaps charcoal, but never black. Australian merino wool is popular, as is cotton. An interview in the Financial Review with upmarket fashion group Fellow Hamilton unearthed these gems. Apparently a jungle print mask by Fellow Hamilton is also proving popular. Well before anyone had heard of COVID-19, hundreds of thousands of Australians already shopped online through retail portals including eBay and Gumtree. Undoubtedly, the COVID-19 pandemic has accelerated the trend, though growth in online shopping was inevitable. One of the biggest players in the market for many years has been eBay. In fact, the company was one of the original .com startups of the 90s, and it's now 25 years old. This morning's guest, here to talk about all things eBay and online retailing, is Managing Director of eBay in Australia and New Zealand, Tim MacKinnon. Morning, Tim.
Hi, morning to everybody.
Now, let's start with the obvious. How busy have you been during the pandemic?
Well, it was funny, Sean, you were just mentioning how we started in the 90s. So eBay started 25 years ago, and in Australia, it's our 21st birthday in September. And if you think about what eBay was created for, it was created to enable contactless commerce. And it was at the time a radical thing. It was the first technology marketplace. We're very used to technology marketplaces that are based on the eBay model like Uber and Airbnb, but it fundamentally enabled people to buy and sell things from each other without having to have contact, without having to look at the good. And so this kind of moment where we had to do contactless shopping, eBay's become a really critical platform. I mean, even before COVID, 2 in 3 Australians have shopped on eBay in the last 12 months.
Wow.
We have about 40,000 Aussie businesses and retailers that depend on us, and 90% of what we sell is new, and I think that surprises a lot of people. And we're depending on the month, the 5th or 6th or 7th most popular site or app in Australia after Facebook and Google properties.
So can you give us a bit of a flavour for what people buy and sell on eBay? I mean, I've used it myself for different things, but it's incredible the breadth of stuff that you can get there.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, it really is everything. So, it's the traditional things that people have associated with eBay. And you think about the waves, the changes that eBay's gone through over its 21 years. We started off being a place to buy unique and quirky things, and then people were clearing things out of their home, and Then we added, small businesses on the platform and began supporting small businesses. So anything that's in a retail business. Then we had a lot of CBT. You remember during the GFC when the US dollar and the Australian dollar were at parity and people were shopping stuff in the US and directly from China. And then in the last 8 years, we've had all the bigger retailers come on the platform as well. Our top products at the moment, it wouldn't surprise you that we're selling a lot of face masks. I think we sold 2 million face masks to Victorians in the last few weeks. And that kind of goes to this point that eBay is just this incredible business model where we have a very diverse supply chain. We don't have a single point of failure in our supply chain. And so sellers from all over the world, all over the country, anyone who has face masks can sell, and then the buyers can rely that they can find a face mask on eBay. But at the same time, we were saying, Nintendo Switches is one of our top products at the moment. And obviously all of the products that people associate with home living, every category is growing, but we've seen exceptional growth in Lego, sporting equipment, home office equipment, tech, but also apparel, also fashion is growing at a really accelerated rate as well. So we do sell everything. Just think of it as Westfield, and we have all those retailers that are in Westfield sell through eBay as well.
And where do you think online shopping is going? Does it have a limit or will it just keep going? And do you think bricks and mortar will slowly decline? I'm sure there'll always be a place for it, but it's hard to see any end to the growth in online shopping here and globally.
I saw somebody the other day use the same analogy for this as they did for online banking and said, once people do mobile and online banking, they don't tend to go back to branches. I don't think it's quite the same. I think people will continue. You've got to remember, eBay's been in Australia for 21 years and e-commerce has been around about that long in this country. And notwithstanding the number of people using online, that people still continue to use offline retail. What I've said about this, and it's an obvious point, is that what we've seen is not really a big change, but just an acceleration of the trend that was going on. And things that accelerate don't tend to go back. It's not going to snap back to the way it was. In Australia, we're running a big A/B test at the moment. So we have the states, there are knows about where there are cases, but we have South Australia, Western Australia, where I grew up, Northern Territory, no cases, right? So about 40% of e-commerce, no cases, everything's open. Obviously their borders are not open, but the growth rates in those markets in online after, what people would call the new normal are still very elevated, much higher growth rates than were before. So that's kind of suggests to me that people have kept some of the same habits they formed during the periods of restricted offline shopping. The figures in April, May, June were huge in terms of 70% online growth. And if you think about that on a penetration that was about 11%, and you think about, overall retail, let's assume it's a 10% decline, is about 20% penetration. So you've seen penetration double. Now, it may not stay at that level, but it's not going to go back to 11. And we even saw that after the GFC, just during that period of the GFC, it doubled. I think it will continue to grow the penetration of e-commerce.
Good business to be in. Tim, thanks for talking to Fear and Greed.
No worries, Sean. Thank you. Have a great day.
That was Tim MacKinnon, Managing Director of eBay in Australia and New Zealand. As always, there's only so much we can fit into an episode of Fear and Greed, so the rest of my interview with Tim MacKinnon is available as bonus content. Subscribe or follow the podcast so it turns up easily in your playlist. In my full interview, Tim shares some insights into what customers are looking for and talks about the surprising number of bricks and mortar stores in Australia that still don't have an online presence. Worth checking out. Now, I've been banging on for a while about word of mouth and telling your friends about this podcast. So it was terrific to come across this recommendation yesterday on LinkedIn from Karen Sorrenti. If you're on the lookout for a great podcast, this one was recommended to me by Bree. It is now part of my daily routine. A 20-minute snapshot of business and world news from an Australian perspective. Great company on the work commute. Thank you, Karen, and thank you, Bree. To everyone listening, can I please ask a favour? If you're finding Fear and Greed useful, can you be like Karen and Bree and tell your LinkedIn network about Fear and Greed? We're a truly independent podcast, so rely entirely on you to get the word out there, and a message like this one helps us enormously. Don't forget to tag Fear and Greed, and I'll give you a shout out in coming days. It's Thursday, the 6th of August. I'm Sean Aylmer, And that was Fear and Greed. Enjoy your day.